Divrei Kohelet ben David melech Birushalayim Havel havalim amar Kohelet Havel havalim hakol havel Ma'itron laitam B'chol amalo sheyamol tachet hashamesh Dor olech v'dor ba Ve'aretz leolam omadet V'zarach hashemesh Uvashamesh Ve'el mikomo shoev Zorechu sham Holech el zarom Ve'sovev el tzafon Sovev, sovev Holech haruach Ve'al svivotav shav haruach Kol hanechalim הולכים אל הים, והים איננו מלא אל מקום, שהנחלים הולכים שם, הם משוועים ללכת. כל הדברים יגעים, לא יוכל איש לדבר, לא תשבע עין לראות, ולא תמלא אוזן משמוע. מה שהיה הוא שיהיה, ומה שנעשה הוא שיעשה, ואין כל חדש תחת השמש. יש דבר שיאמר ראה זה חדש הוא, כבר היה לעולמים, אשר היה מלפנינו. אין זיכרון לראשונים וגם לאחרונים שיהיו, לא יהיה להם זיכרון אם שיהיו לאחרונה. אני קהלת הייתי מלך על ישראל בירושלים, ונתתי ליבי לדרוש ולתור וחוכמה כל אשר נעשה תחת השמיים הוא עניין רע נתן אלוהים לבני האדם לענות בו. ראיתי את כל המעשים שנעשו תחת השמש, והנה הכל הבל ורעות רוח. מעוות לא יוכל לתקון, וחסרון לא יוכל להימנות. דיברתי אני עם ליבי לאמור אני, הנה הגדלתי והוספתי חוכמה על כל אשר היה לפניי על ירושלים, וליבי ראה הרבה חוכמה ודעת, ותנה ליבי לדעת חוכמה ודעת הוללות בסכלות. ידעתי שגם זהו רעיון רוח, כי ברוב חוכמה רב כעס, ויוסיף דעת יוסיף מכאוב.
A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. What value then can the man of affairs get from what he earns? I have observed the business that God gave man to be concerned with. He brings everything to pass precisely at its time. He also puts eternity in their mind, but without humans ever guessing from first to last all the things that God brings to pass. Thus, I realize that the only worthwhile thing there is for them to enjoy themselves and do what is good in their lifetime. Also, that whenever a person does eat and drink and gets enjoyment out of all their wealth, it is a gift of God. I realize too that whatever God has brought to pass will recur evermore. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it, and God has brought to pass that humans revere God. What is occurring occurred long since, and what is to occur occurred long since, and God seeks the pursued. And indeed, I have observed under the sun, alongside justice there is wickedness, alongside righteousness there is wickedness. I mused, God will doom both righteous and wicked, for there is a time for every experience and for every happening. So I decided, as regards people, to dissociate them from the divine beings and to face the fact that they are beasts. For in respect of the fate of humans and the fate of beasts, they have one and the same fate. As the one dies, so dies the other, and both have the same life breath. Humans have no superiority over beasts, since both amount to nothing. Both go to the same place, both come from dust and both return to dust. Who knows if a person's life breath does rise upward and if a beast's breath does sink down into the earth? I saw that there is nothing better for humans than to enjoy their possessions, since that is their portion. For who can enable them to see what will happen afterwards? A good name is better than fragrant oil, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to a house of feasting, for that is the end of every person, and a living one should take it to heart. Vexation is better than revelry, for though the face be sad, the heart may be glad. Wise people are drawn to a house of mourning, and fools to a house of merrymaking. It is better to listen to a wise person's reproof than to listen to the praise of fools. For the levity of the fool is like the crackling of nettles under a kettle. But that too is illusory. For cheating may rob the wise person of reason and destroy the prudence of the cautious. The end of a matter is better than the beginning of it. Better a patient spirit than a haughty spirit. Don't let your spirit be quickly vexed, for vexation abides in the breasts of fools. Don't say, how has it happened that former times were better than these? For it is not wise of you to ask that question. Wisdom is as good as a patrimony, and even better for those who behold the sun. For to be in the shelter of wisdom is to be also in the shelter of money, and the advantage of intelligence is that wisdom preserves life of people who possess it. Consider God's doing. Who can straighten what God has twisted? So in a time of good fortune, enjoy the good fortune, and in a time of misfortune, reflect. The one no less than the other was God's doing. Consequently, people may find no fault with God. In my own brief span of life, I have seen both these things. Sometimes a good person perishes in spite of their goodness, and sometimes a wicked one endures in spite of their wickedness. So don't overdo goodness, and don't act the wise person to excess, or you may be dumbfounded. Don't overdo wickedness, and don't be a fool, or you may die before your time. It is best that you grasp the one without letting go of the other, for one who fears God will do their duty by both. Wisdom is more of a stronghold to a wise person than 10 magnates that a city may contain. For there is not one good person on earth who does what is best and doesn't err. Finally, don't pay attention to everything that is said, so that you may not hear your slave reviling you. For well you may remember the many times that you yourself have reviled others. All this I tested with wisdom. I thought I could fathom it, but it eludes me. The secret of what happens is elusive, and deep, deep down, who can discover it? I put my mind to studying, exploring, and seeking wisdom, and the reason of things, and to studying wickedness, stupidity, madness, and folly. Now I find people more bitter than death, They are all traps, their hands are fetters, and their heart are snares. The person who is pleasing to God escapes others, and that who is displeasing is caught by others. See, this is what I found, said Kohelet, item by item in my search for the reason of things. As for what I sought further but did not find, I found only one human being in 1,000, and the one I found among so many was never the one I thought. But see, this I did find. God made people plain, but they have engaged in too much reasoning. Send your bread forth upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Distribute portions to 7 or even to 8, for you cannot know what misfortune may occur on earth. If the clouds are filled, they will pour down rain on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, the tree will stay where it falls. If one watches the wind, they will never sow, and if one observes the clouds, they will never reap. Just as you do not know how the life breath passes into the limbs without the womb of the pregnant woman, so you cannot foresee the actions of God, who cause all things to happen. Sow your seed in the morning, and don't hold back your hand in the evening, since you don't know which is going to succeed, the one or the other, or if both are equally good. How sweet is the light! What a delight for the eyes to behold the sun! Even if a person lives many years, let them enjoy themselves in all of them, remembering how many the days of darkness are going to be. The only future is nothingness. O youth, enjoy yourself while you are young. Let your heart lead you to enjoyment in the days of your youth. Follow the desires of your heart and the glances of your eyes, but know well that God will call you to account for all such things, and banish care from your mind, and pluck sorrow out of your flesh. For youth and black hair are fleeting.
Uzichor et borecha v'imei behurotecha ad asher lo yavohu yemei hara v'higiu shanim asher tomar ein li vahem chefetz ad asher lo techshach hashamesh ve'aor ve'areach ve'akochavim ve'shalvu he'avim achar hagashem v'yom shiazu shomeri habayit v'hitavetu anshe chayil ובטלו התוכנות כי מתו וחשכו הרוחות בארובות וסוגרו דלתיים בשוק וישפל כל התחנה ויקום לכל הציפור וישחו כל בנות השיר גם מגבוה יראו ותחתים בדרך והנץ השקן ויסתבל לחגיו ותפר הביונה כי הולך אדם אל בית עולמו וסבבו בשוק הסופדים עד אשר לא יראתי כבל הכסף ותרוץ סגולת הזהב ותישבר כד על המבוע ונרץ הגלגל אל הבור וישוב העפר על הארץ כשהיה והרוח תשוב אל האלוהים אשר נתנך הבל הבלים אמר הקהלת הכל הבל מיותר שהיה קהלת חכם לימד דעת את העם ויזן וחיקר תיקן משלים הרבה ביקש קהלת למצוא דברי חפץ וכתוב יושר דברי אמת דברי חכמים כדרבונות מסמרות נטועים מלא אסופות ניתנו מרועה אחד ויותר מהמה וניזהר עשות ספרים הרבה אין קץ ולהג הרבה יגיעת בשר סוף דבר הכל נשמע את אלוהים ירא ואת מצוותיו שמור כי זה כל אדם כי כל מעשה האלוהים יביא ומשפט על כל נעלם אם טוב ואם רע